In the English language, there are so many Bible versions that it is almost impossible to count them all. But what are the three worst and even most dangerous translations out there? That's what we'll be covering today on this episode of Swords of Truth. Stick around, you're going to be very, very surprised about what the worst Bible translation is. Without further ado, let's get into it. With number 3, we have the King James Version. And it's exactly like it sounds like. It is the King James Version, which is the Bible I use, but the King James Version is the exact same as the King James. But in every single passage that God explicitly states homosexuality is to be condemned, it switches the words around. It makes the phrase a little bit harder to understand. It makes the phrase obsolete and not understandable. So as you guys can see on the screen here, it says in the KJV, "Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is an abomination." This is a clear blanket statement, okay? But in the QJV, it says, "Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind in the temple of Moloch. It is an abomination." They completely added that phrase when it does not supposed to mean that. It literally changes the entire meaning of the passage. Also, in Romans 1:27, it says in the KJV, "And likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves the recompense of their error which was meet." But in the QJV, the Queen James, it says, "Men with men working that which is pagan and unseemly. For this cause God gave the idolaters up unto their vile affections, receiving in themselves that recompense of the error which was meet." You see, by just adding a couple words and taking out a couple phrases, they completely change the meaning of this passage. And they do this for a reason. This Bible, the King James Version, is marketed as the world's first gay Bible. And that's exactly what it is used for. So these woke churches can use a Bible, and the Bible that they use, they just change a couple words, and it doesn't go against their sin. There's no manuscript evidence for the changes. The translators responsible for this translation will not identify themselves, and they have only changed those homosexual passages, the ones in Leviticus, 1 Corinthians 6, and many others, and Romans 1, where God explicitly states that homosexuality is a sin. Now, even many textual critics deny its credibility. Mike Winger, James White, and many others say that this is a horrible translation, and I agree. You should definitely stay away from it. They just changed the passages that they wanted to, so they can just use a different Bible and just say, well, you see, the Bible doesn't actually say this. So instead of changing and conforming their lives to Christ, they just found it easier to change a couple words in the Bible so that they wouldn't have to change. Number 2, the Passion Translation. Many of you may be surprised how the Passion Translation made the list. At least put it below the King James Version. It doesn't preach blatant heresy, does it? Well, you may be surprised to learn that a pastor named Brian Simmons is the one responsible for translating and writing most of the Passion Translation. He is part of the NAR, or New Apostolic Reformation. In case you're wondering what the New Apostolic Reformation is, it's a very hyper-charismatic form of Christianity that brings New Age practices. A good example of this is Bethel, where they go up to heaven and teach that in their classes, when in reality it's actually astral projecting, and that is what one thing the New Age teaches. If you guys want to learn more, I encourage you to dig in and find out what the New Apostolic Reformation is. But anyway, Brian Simmons reflected a lot of beliefs in this translation, and that's why it made it on this list. It's a very dangerous Bible translation. People like Mike Winger, James White, and many more Bible teachers mark and avoid it, and they make videos exposing it. He claims he received new revelation from God in how to translate the Greek text, and that could be a form of Gnosticism or a New Age practice.
He breathed on me so that I would do the project, and I felt downloads coming instantly. I received downloads. It was like I got a chip put inside of me. I got a connection inside of me to hear him better, to understand the scriptures better, and hopefully to translate.
And another reason why it made this list, it says, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord had made." That's Genesis 3:1 right there. And I find a lot of Christians using this translation not knowing the hidden dangers behind it and who actually made it and how this is not a very good translation and how you should avoid it. So please, at all cost, avoid the Passion Translation. If you guys have friends who use the Passion Translation, or you know someone who uses it, tell them to get away from that. It's gonna teach bad things. So without further ado, without keeping you guys waiting much longer, the number one worst Bible translation ever made is, drumroll please, the New World Translation. Now, many of you guys have probably heard it. Let me go get you a copy of one I have. This is the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures, and it is not a good translation at all. This is actually used by the Jehovah Witnesses, the JWs, and it changes many passages that prove Jesus' deity, one of those being John 1:1. So let's turn there. Now, what the inspired Word of God says in John 1:1 is, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." This proves Jesus' deity. It proves he was there in the beginning. He was infinite. It proves that he was there with God. That proves the Trinity, that Jesus and God are not the same person. But the mystery of the Trinity also, the Word was God. They're both God, but they are still one person, but they have different persons as well. What the New World Translation does, and I'll turn there in here, but what it does is it completely changes what it says, and it only has to use one word, and only one word will dramatically change the passage. So let's turn there to John 1:1 in the New World Translation. This is what the New World Translation says for John 1:1. "In the beginning the Word was, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God." That little, just one letter, A, changes the entire meaning of the passage. Now it changes Jesus' title as being God, as being the Almighty, to just being a God and being under God. He's just a created being. Also in Colossians, it says that all other things were created by him, instead of all things were created by him. And this agrees with many of the Greek texts. In fact, one of the ways to prove Jehovah Witnesses wrong is by just opening up their Greek text that they publish it. And even their Greek text disagrees with the word other in that passage. You can see that they added the word other to that passage. You can see that they added the word a to John 1:1. So it completely disagrees with the Greek text. It is probably one of the worst translations because it is the Bible used by one of the biggest cults in America, and that's the Jehovah Witnesses. If you guys want to see how to witness to Jehovah Witnesses and how to get them out of that cult, I definitely suggest watching Mike Winger's video. Of course, I do disagree with some of the things he teaches, but most of the things he teaches I definitely do agree with. So thank you all for watching this video. If you guys have any questions, don't be afraid to ask in the comments, and I'll try to get back to you and try and give you guys an answer. So thank you all for watching once again. I hope to see you in the next video, and I hope to be making a lot more often. Have a nice day, and we'll see you later. God bless.